Hi, and welcome back. In this lesson, we will cover another collaborative elicitation technique called observations. But first, let's define what I exactly mean with observation. Observation is the act of careful watching and listening. It's the activity of paying close attention to someone or something in order to get information. What are some of the characteristics that we can distill from this definition? Careful watching and listening hints towards the act of staying hidden and to observe what somebody or someone is doing. Now don't worry, we're not going to spy on people. There are two types of observations. There's job shadowing and task analysis. In job shadowing, you observe someone in their day-to-day activities and document everything they do, even the obvious steps, regarding a specific process. You don't want to disturb the person as you might influence them when they do their task, and they might do their task differently. As a result, the information that you collect is not as relevant anymore. The other type of observation is task analysis. It's slightly different from the job shadowing as there you are allowed to disturb the person to ask questions and/or clarifications, for instance. Another characteristic that we can filter from the definition is to get information. Observation techniques are often applied in order to gather information on existing processes and to identify how to improve them. When would I use observation elicitation techniques? I would opt for job shadowing or task analysis if I want to quickly understand an existing process in order to improve it. Observation is the best form of data collection for existing processes, as it is almost unbiased. However, I would not go for this technique if I were asked to completely innovate an end-to-end process. Observation techniques are very focused on what exists today and not what could be in the future. How can you best execute an observation? Let me walk you through the steps that I take when doing observations. First, there's the preparation phase, which usually happens 1 week in advance. I make sure that I'm allowed to observe the person by checking with them and their superior. I explain what the purpose is of the observation, and I prepare my observation material, which could be a camera or a recorder. Next, during the observation, I do the following. In the case of job shadowing, I make sure that I don't disturb the person. I record everything and make notes of elements that surprise me or where I have questions about. I can ask these questions later. I thank the person for their time as well. Please note, depending on the process, that the duration of an observation can vary from a few minutes to literally days. If you need to follow up, say, the onboarding of a retail customer in a commercial bank, it can take multiple days before the user is fully onboarded. They have to wait for their credit card and card reader, for instance. And there are also multiple legal and compliance checks that have to be done. And now for the final phase of the observation, the aftercare of observation. There is still some work to do here. So, for instance, I convert the recorded data into usable information by mapping the steps in a process flowchart. I delete any sensitive and personal data. And finally, I send the results to the concerned stakeholders for review and/or approval. Moving on now to the pros and cons of observation. Regarding the pros, observations are able to provide an unbiased view of how a process works. It's also very rich in the amount of information that you can get through observations. It's easy to detect workarounds that have formed throughout the years. A workaround is often an indication of a possible improvement. The cost of observations can vary somewhat based on the process that is being analyzed. From the perspective of the person that is being observed, observations can be considered to be quite cheap because the person is doing their work anyways. However, from the perspective of the person that is observing, it can become quite costly, especially if the observant is following and analyzing a process over the course of multiple days or even weeks. And the last advantage of observation is that it is very customer or user oriented, because you follow them along every step of the process. Moving over now to the disadvantages. Observations can be quite time-consuming when it comes to processing the information that has been collected. As mentioned before, observations can be quite time-consuming if the observation session spans multiple days or weeks. Not everyone might be willing to cooperate in this type of elicitation session because people in generally don't like to be observed. Another disadvantage is that during an observation session, especially during job shadowing, it's not always possible to confirm understanding or to ask questions. Another one is that you often can only observe what you see and not what happens behind the scenes. So additional elicitation is often required to create a full picture. And the last disadvantage that I can think of is that observations are very focused on existing processes. So the improvements that you would find are quite marginal. I would advise to go for another approach if you're tasked with completely innovating a process from end to end. I can't let you go without a couple of best practices. Here's the first one. Try recording using a camera or a microphone as to make sure that you don't miss anything. You often don't get a second chance to do an observation, so it has to be right from the first time. Next, try to map the full process after the observation using a process flowchart in order to detect possible improvements. Also, try to show that process flowchart to the person that you observed, because you might have missed something and they can point it out, and they can also already provide some improvements. Then explain to the person that you will observe that they are not the ones that are being tested, but the process is the one that is being tested. You are there to make their life easier and more productive. As you follow along, list the questions that you have with an indication on which part of the process it is related to in order to quickly find it back. And finally, explain to the person what will happen to the information that you collected. The more transparent, the better. And now we have arrived at the end of the observation elicitation technique. You're doing great. Let's move on to the next technique. See you there.